basically, if you're Canelo Alvarez, you were already the pound-for-pound best and the biggest star in the sport. And, of course, I think Saturday night solidified both of those things. So the question is, who do you fight next? Here's the choices that it seems to me, BC. There is a trilogy up for grabs with Gennady Golovkin, who had a big, emphatic win over somebody who did not deserve to be fighting him, basically, on Friday night. Then you have Demetrius Andrade, who engaged in the stupidest debate imaginable with Chris Mannix on DAZN. You have Charlo sitting at 160 that I think would be an interesting fight. It's one that I would like to see. You have Artur Beterbiev up at 175 pounds. And you have Caleb Plant still sitting there at 168. Okay, BC, what is the right next fight for Canelo Alvarez?
It seems Canelo is really interested, Luke, in collecting belts. And not in a bad way, in like a good way, in an old school kind of way. If you're in his division and you have a title, he's looking to collect it. I think what I want to separate in that is he wants to focus on 168. Part of what makes him so good in the ring right now is he's not killing himself to cut down to 54 or even 160 anymore. At 168, he said it in the interview afterwards, he's comfortable. He's able to eat. He's able to be, we've seen that in both combat sports. When you're at your natural weight, man, there's a difference. Obviously, he has the skill to back it up. I think he's going to focus on 168. I think him moving up to 175 that time against Kovalev was kind of a targeted look, Luke. Kind of like Roy Jones saying, my dream is to get a heavyweight title. So is there a guy I can get it against? Oh, John Ruiz. He's slower. He doesn't have heavy power. He's more of a busy guy. I can outpoint him. I think that's what he saw in Kovalev, a guy with a bad chin who's old and on the way out. I don't really think Canelo's a light heavyweight. He's a fantastic super middleweight. And him being in this spot as a promotional and network free agent, I think he's being serious when he says he wants the belts. So that's Billy Joe Saunders with the WBO, which would have to be on DAZN. And that's Caleb Plant, who has the the IBF, I believe, who fights on PBC, and also David Benavidez, who had the WBC, lost it on the scale on that Showtime fight. Canelo just picked up that vacant title. I think those are the fights to make for him right now. It's interesting. Eddie Hearn, the Matchroom Sport promoter who promoted this fight on Saturday, said in an interview afterwards that Canelo came up to him and said something like 3 down, 2 to go. And what he meant by that was, I beat 3 of your fighters already, Eddie, meaning Rocky Fielding, Daniel Jacobs, and now Callum Smith. And 2 to go, meaning Billy Joe Saunders and maybe Gennady Golovkin too. So it would be interesting. I don't think Canelo wants the Golovkin fight. I don't think he thinks he needs it, but I do think he understands how badly the fans want it and how much people are still holding on to the fact that, Triple G kind of got screwed over from the totality of the first 2 fights, which I also subscribe to. I just think at this point, Luke, that fight's past him. Triple G in this fight, also in the Derevyanchenko fight, I mean, he's slowed down a lot. He's got a great tan. He's in shape. He still hits really hard. But it's like watching, he's very slow compared to what he used to be. He's not the destroyer he was. It would be a great build to that third fight. There's storylines. It would probably be fun action because the first 2 were. But I think Canelo stops him. I mean, I'm been the biggest Triple G guy of all time. I want to see Canelo challenge himself at this weight class. I get your want for something like a better beef fight, but he brings almost no commercial value at this point to Canelo. I think it's much more likely you see him try to unify all 4 belts at 68 and then decide what's next. Do I go up to 75 for one more? Do I take a Jermall Charlo moving up? Do I take an Errol Spence moving up? Spence trying to fight him at middleweight. He was in the crowd on Saturday. A lot of options for Canelo. But I think at this point, Luke, we can trust that he's going to make the right one for us as fans. I mean, he's doing this the right way. There's no playbook on how to be the biggest star in the sport, but he's doing this in such a fan-friendly way, even more than Floyd was able to. So I give him that tip of the cap. If he wants Saunders, if he wants Plant, I'm here, front row. Let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, Spence angling for a Canelo fight. I mean, get the fuck out of here with this. You got business with Bud Crawford and nobody else. I don't even want to entertain. Not to say that wouldn't be a fun fight sort of in a vacuum, but like given where we're at, I was like, get the fuck out of here with this. Okay, so what do I think should be next? Well, I mean, here's the way I look at it, BC. The Triple G fight to me, when they fought the first time, King Mo really disagreed with me when he watched it, but I thought Triple G won that fight, okay? Yes. And I thought he got a little bit screwed. In the second fight, I thought Canelo won, and more to the point, the adjustments Canelo was able to make. I mean, he fought totally different the second time around. And I was amazed at his growth and change in strategy and his ability to implement such a uniquely different game plan the second time around. I acknowledge that the second fight was close. I don't mean to say that there's no debate about that one either. Just for me, I recognize that I think the best case for saying Triple G got screwed comes from the first, not the second fight. That being said, BC, I don't know how you can look at these two guys today and decide that this fight is going to be even as competitive as the second one. Now, that's just speculation. Nobody really knows in the end. And I certainly agree that there is real market potential. I mean, everywhere Canelo goes, it has to be annoying that he still has to answer questions about whether or not he wants to fight Triple G and what about Triple G this and Triple G that. But I don't think that's the fight to make anymore. I think Canelo has passed him at this point. I think he's passed him by enough of a margin where I don't know if he stops him, but I certainly think he gets a clean and comfortable win. And all that would do for Triple G is remind folks that when it came time for this trilogy to really be done, the guy who was better all along, even if you could argue in your mind opposite, would be Canelo Alvarez. It would actually undercut the value of the sort of robbery, or at least the questionable decision anyway, from the first fight. It doesn't actually service him to me. So if I'm Canelo Alvarez, or at least if I'm a Canelo Alvarez fan or observer, I also recognize that what I'm about to say is not what the market dictates. In fact, for that reason, I suspect it probably won't happen. But I'm going to argue for Artur Beterbiev. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because it's not that the fight with Plant doesn't hold value. Again, unifying all the titles at 168 would be obviously quite impressive. And there's ways to get it done without a whole lot of hassle and rigmarole in terms of the negotiations, given where they already are. But I would say, BC, that if you beat Callum Smith this way, can somebody really make the case that Caleb Plant has a much better chance than Callum Smith against this version?
Totally different style, though. He has elite hand speed. He can box. I don't know if he can take Canelo's best punches, but Caleb Plant can box, bro. I mean,
you're the biggest Caleb Plant fan there is besides his mom. So let's sort of like put that caveat out there. I'm not telling you that Caleb Plant is trash. He is, if not the best guy at 168, the second best. I mean, this is what we're talking about in terms of where he stands at 168. But the ease with which, I mean, Canelo didn't just get by Callum Smith. He walked over him. It was not especially close. And so I recognize styles make fights, and there are reasons to think it'd be more difficult. But BC, gun to your head, is Caleb Plant the guy to beat Canelo Alvarez? No, the fuck he is not. No,
I believed that he could last year. I believed it would be a really close fight. This version of Canelo now is separating it, because the one thing you can say negative against Caleb Plant is after the Uzcategui fight, he just has not fought elite competition. They've been setting him up against guys he can look great against because he's marketable as a, let's be honest, as an unbeaten white fighter who can talk with a great backstory, right? I mean, come on, you know?
All right, so the last thing I'll say on this is if he goes the Plant direction, it's hardly a scandal. If he goes the Triple G direction, you get it. You know, the market's going to dictate what the market's going to dictate. But to me,
what if he fought Saunders and Triple G next year?
Man,
you okay with that?
Billy Joe, I'm not interested in Billy Joe Saunders at all whatsoever. I have zero interest in that. Let me just say this last point. I'll pitch it back to you, BC. The operative question that I am working with, and again, this is just my interpretation. No one has to agree. But the only way I'm looking at this is to say, when I look at the landscape of the weight classes in which he is reasonably considering, who stands the best chance of giving this guy a fight or even beating him? And and you can even say Dmitry Bivol if you wanted to do that. But the guy I'm thinking about is Beterbiev. That guy you can clearly say would be like, you know what? If Canelo could beat him, then you're talking about an all-time great at that point. That would be so phenomenal that it would be shattering in the boxing world. That's why that's the one I want to see.
So here's what we need for that to happen, okay? We would need Canelo to collect the two belts he doesn't have first at 168. And we would need ESPN and Top Rank to really make Beterbiev a star. Really just, I mean, like, look, better be Beterbiev, however you want to say it. He's right there at like number 11 on my pound for pound list. The guys, what he did to Alexander Vodzik and took his title, knocked him out, and retired him. I mean, this guy's a force of nature. Canelo would have to outbox him. It would be a great challenge, but you need that guy to get popular first to make it really worth it. I do think if Canelo gets all the four belts at 168 and is only, let's say 32 years old at the end of that road, yeah, he's probably going to look at 175 and see, can I do this? He's going to need stars, though. So that's why I don't shit on the Spence idea. Maybe not right now, to your point. Also, I'm not convinced Canelo really wants to make 160 ever again. So he would kind of need Errol Spence to defeat Bud Crawford first, become that star of stars at welterweight, and then make it worth it for Canelo to come down in weight. I also don't want to throw away this idea. I do think it's a short window for it. So before we move on to MMA, let me just say this. My Rafe Bartholomew, you know him, my great boxing mind, my brethren in this podcast game, he always wanted Andre Ward to come out of retirement and fight Canelo. And in the beginning, before Canelo established himself at 168, I was like, no, man, he's too big. He's not as marketable as other big stars. Ward, by the way, going into the Hall of Fame in the 2021 class. Luke, he'll be 37 in a couple months. I think it's a small window, meaning you have to do it next year. But would you be down for that? Ward, they could do it at 175. Ward is a legitimate light heavyweight with speed, boxing ability. He would, in theory, have a power advantage over Canelo as well. That would be the toughest freaking challenge of a remaining legend, unbeaten guy who could give you such critical value. And Canelo loves stockpiling these names on his resume, right? When Andre Ward retired 3 years ago, he was your pound-for-pound king after beating Kovalev twice. There'd be a lot to gain in that fight. Not maybe pay-per-view buys as much as others, but just in terms of, like, did I beat everybody in my era that I could have? I think there's a small window. And even though Andre Ward is back and forth on the idea, I think there's part of him that wants one more big challenge.
It's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of it because I actually rewatched the Vosdik and Beterbiev fight. Again, I don't know how to pronounce his name properly, but and I remember in the beginning of that fight, Andre Ward is like, I left the division in good hands. These guys are amazing. And you could kind of tell he was like, all yours, fellas, So for the reasons you articulate, not a big sales thing because I don't think his 2 fights with Kovalev sold all that well. In fact, I remember one of them only had like 10,000 people there. It was not necessarily the biggest box office draw. But that'd be an interesting name. I mean, I don't hate the idea. Listen, I don't hate the idea. I actually do not hate the idea. It's just, of all the possibilities, to go to that one wouldn't be the worst thing. To me, better than, a lot of other choices. But it's not my first choice. It's not even my second or third. It's just an interesting sort of sideways thing of looking at it. Sort of the way I go.
TV taught me how to dream. It was a life jacket. I don't think you can be an artist and not touch people